Historians be like, there's no evidence these two women were gay. The evidence. Snowflower and the Secret Fan by Lisa See is a historical fiction novel set in 19th century China, where young girls have their feet bound, marriages are arranged like business deals, and women communicate their deepest feelings through a secret written language called Nushu. The story follows Lily and Snowflower, who are bound together as Lao Tong, or Old Saints, a relationship considered deeper than marriage. Now, when I picked up this book from one of those take a book, leave a book library boxes, I thought, okay, maybe I'm projecting a little when I think this has queer vibes. But then a certain scene happened, and I was like, wait, hold on, this is gay as hell. I looked around for online reviews and discussions, and surprise, surprise, most people brush the relationship off as very close friends, which, like, sure.
And they were roommates.
Oh my god, they were roommates.
But also, maybe they were soulmate society wouldn't let exist. Let's talk about it. In this essay, I'll explore the bond between Lily and Snowflower, why it feels undeniably queer, and how it fits into the historical context of women's roles in Qing Dynasty China, and how modern media continues to erase these types of stories under the safe little label of friendship. Because, let's be real, when one girl's touching another girl's body, writing characters on her with her saliva, and whispering secrets in the moonlight, that's not just a BFF moment, that's a different kind of love. So today we're going to look at the story through a different lens.
你是拉拉吗？
The story occurs in 19th century Hunan province, China, a time and place where women's roles were strictly confined to the home. Girls were expected to be obedient, submissive, and visible. Education? Not allowed. Marriage? Mandatory. Individuality? Cute, but illegal. One of the most infamous practices at the time? Foot binding. Known as the 3-inch golden lotus, foot binding was considered essential if a woman ever hoped to marry well. And it wasn't just painful, it was straight up brutal. Girls as young as 7 would have their toes broken and bent to under their feet, the arch crushed with cloth bandages, and the bones reshaped until their feet were permanently disformed. One woman, Wang Lifan, recalled how she continued the biting herself even after her mother died, saying, "Young bones are soft and break more easily." Just make that your nightmare fuel for the day. Although it was officially banned in 1912, many women continued binding their feet in secret, and for survivors today, it's a mix of trauma, regret, and pride. One woman told NPR, "I regret binding my feet, but at the time, if you didn't, no one would marry you." And here's the thing, it wasn't just cultural or aesthetic, it was control. Foot binding literally reshaped women's bones and limited their ability to walk. It kept them confined, dependent, and close to home. It was a social system that physically restricted women's movement, making sure they stayed in their place, not just emotionally, but structurally. Not to mention that all of this was done just to please men. Bound feet weren't just a marriage requirement, they were a fetishized beauty standard, a way to make women more sexually desirable, more delicate, more feminine in the eyes of their future husbands. In a society where freedom wasn't an option for women, even your own body wasn't really yours. And honestly, that's not just history. Because when you look at the way reproductive rights are being restricted in the US today, from abortion bans to limited access to birth control, it's the same playbook, using culture, religion, or law to say, your body, actually, it belongs to society, to men, to power. The methods change, but the goal stays the same, keeping women small, scared, and stuck. Anyways, back to 19th century China. Now, if all that wasn't enough, let's talk about communication. During this time period, women were widely denied access to education to be able to read or write standard Chinese. So in one tiny mountainous part of Hunan, in Jiangyong County, forgive my horrible fucking pronunciation, women invented their own script, Nushu, literally meaning women's script. It's the only known written system in the whole world developed exclusively by women. Nushu was written on fans, scarves, and cloth belts, or shared in letters and embroidered messages between women, often in secret.
No man could read it. Not even the emperor knew about it.
It was between those women, sworn sisters. When they visit each other, they would sing together.
It wasn't spoken aloud, but sung at gatherings, like a whisper network in lyrical code. The most iconic use? A cloth-bound diary called a Third Day Book gifted to brides 3 days after marriage, filled with messages of sorrow, solidarity, and support from their mothers and friends as they left their birth homes for their husbands' families.
These Nushu writings were gifts from my sisters for my wedding. I don't know how to read them.
This was my mother's book. You see, there are Nushu writings in it. I don't know what the writing says. My mother gave it to me as a marriage gift for the third day homecoming ceremony after the wedding.
This book was called the Third Day Book, and it marked a very important feature of the local marriage custom, the third day ceremony.
Locals even nicknamed it mosquito writing because the characters were thin, delicate, and slanted like tiny buzzing strokes.
Nushu works were written in a poetic format with 7 characters per line, and it was sung rather than read. Nushu was devastated during the revolutions which purported to liberate women. Though women began to attend schools in the 1920s, after the fall of the feudal system, only Chinese was taught. After the communist liberation of 1949, Nushu customs were indiscriminately abolished. Ironically, Nushu, being syllabic, is vastly more efficient than hieroglyphic Chinese, and it constitutes a modern alternative to this ancient form of writing. It also carries the soul of freedom and equality. Above all, it demonstrates women's ability to contribute to the advancement of civilization.
And here's the thing, most people, even in China, had no idea this language existed. Even actress Li Bingbing, who starred in the Snowflower film adaptation, said,
Actually, I am Chinese, right? And I know a lot of Chinese culture. But I didn't know something about Lao Tong and Nushu. It's after this movie I just know there's a Lao Tong and Nushu, this kind of culture in China. It's really secret and it's really, we need to protect this and this kind of culture,
I mean, imagine an entire underground language just so women could tell each other the truth. So yeah, the story isn't just set in the past. It's soaked in a history of isolation, pain, and resistance. And all of that shapes the way we understand the bond between Lily and Snowflower. It wasn't just a deep friendship. It was the only space where emotional intimacy could exist at all. And that's where we start to see something more. Snowflower and the Secret Fan is a historical fiction novel by Lisa See, set in 19th century Hunan Province, China, a time when girls were subjected to foot-binding, married off, and kept confined to the domestic sphere. Within this patriarchal system, 2 girls, Lily and Snowflower, are bound together in a rare and sacred relationship known as Lao Tong, a lifeline vow between 2 women which was deeper and more enduring than marriage. Their bonds begin when they're just 7 years old, and over the years they exchange messages written in Nushu, a secret written language developed by women and for women, hidden from the eyes of men. Messages scribbled across fans, handkerchiefs, and cloth belts became a lifeline through which they shared their inner lives, joy, pain, secrets, and longing. The novel follows their journey through several distinct phases of womanhood: daughter days, hairpinning days, rice and salt days, marked by foot binding, dowry preparations, arranged marriages, childbirth, and devastating misunderstandings. As the girls grow into women, their emotional intimacy deepens, but so do the pressures pulling them apart: family obligations, societal expectations, and the brutal limitations placed on women in their time. Told from Lily's perspective as an old woman looking back on her life, the story is a meditation on love, regret, and longing. Alright, so the book was adapted into a movie in 2011, directed by Wayne Wong and produced by Florence Sloan, Wendy Murdo, and Hugo Shang. The original script was adapted by Angela Workman, with revisions by Ronald Bass? Don't know, and Michael Ray, and it stars Jun Ji-hyun, Lee Bingbing, Vivian Wu, and Hugh Jackman? You know what, sure, why not throw Wolverine into a story that takes place in 19th century China? That makes perfect sense. So, okay, what did I think of the movie? It was okay, but it could have done a lot more with the material. Like, if you're going to adapt a deeply emotional, subtly queer story, why flatten it into a generic friendship-coded drama? It's like taking Wagyu beef and cooking it in the microwave. Friggin' good ol' Chef Mike. First of all, the movie takes a pretty ambitious approach by adding a modern parallel storyline. It follows not just the 19th century Laotong bond between Lily and Snowflower, but also a contemporary friendship between Nina and Sophia in 21st century Shanghai. This isn't necessarily a bad idea, but in execution it just kind of exists. The two timelines are supposed to mirror each other, but neither one feels fully developed. I mean, the movie's an hour and 44 minutes long, but it somehow manages to feel both rushed and slow at the same time, which is, I don't know, impressive, I guess? Then there's the language issue. The 19th century scenes are in Chinese, which makes perfect sense. But most of the modern day dialogue is in English, except it's not any of the main actors' first languages. I mean, except Hugh Jackman, obviously. And like, okay, I get it. They were probably trying to make the movie more marketable internationally, but it's still a little jarring. And look, their English isn't bad, but it definitely holds back their performances. You can tell they're struggling to move the way they want to. They're essentially acting with their hand tied behind their back.
I still don't understand why you did it. I didn't know what I was doing. I just did it. You thought I couldn't pass my exam.
And it's not just the modern day English dialogue that's awkward, but the 19th century scenes as well, because all of Jun Ji-hyun's lines are dubbed. So there are moments when the lip movement is off and it really throws off any immersion that was built. And, you know, side note, Jun Ji-hyun is a Korean actor, so she doesn't speak Chinese, so I guess that's why they need to dub it. Another big issue is that the movie really glosses over the emotional core of the original story. It cuts or compresses many of the scenes that show the depth of Lily and Snowflower's bond, which means the gut-wrenching emotional beats just don't land as hard. Like, bro, you had almost 2 hours to work with. If you're going to do two parallel storylines, at least give them shit. If you're going to do two parallel storylines, at least give them both enough space to breathe. There were several notable omissions, including the vituperation letter, which was just excluded, and then also several events during their formative years, like the passing of a certain character, was just completely gone. And of course, the most notable omission, and the one that sticks out the most to me, is the complete erasure of the erotic scene from the novel. You know, the one I mentioned earlier, where they're touching each other intimately, that scene? Yeah, it's just gone. And look, I get it. Maybe it's because of how queer relationships are still perceived in mainstream media. But come on, that was one of the most explicit moments of intimacy in the whole book, and it got cut. But that's not the only thing missing. Other smaller but equally meaningful moments are gone too. Like when Lily reflects on how much she wants Snowflower to love her. Those lines, those little touches that hint at something more than just friendship, are mostly absent, and it's a real loss. That said, the movie isn't entirely without crumbs. There's a scene about an hour in where Lily is comforting Snowflower after her husband has beaten her. She brushes the hair from Snowflower's face, they lean their foreheads together, and Lily gently places her hand on Snowflower's cheek. The way they look at each other in that moment is so charged. It's like, yeah, that's not just gal pals energy, my guy. Plus, there are hints of jealousy in both the historical and modern storylines. In the 19th century scenes, there's a moment where Lily overhears Snowflower having intercourse with her husband, and she seems visibly uncomfortable, which echoes the novel scene where Lily feels betrayed upon realizing that Snowflower actually enjoys intercourse with her husband, whereas that's something that Lily finds herself to be purely transactional. And in the modern timeline, there's the whole thing with Nina being clearly bothered by Sophia's relationship with her fiancé Andrew. There's this one scene in the jazz club where Andrew is singing about just one kiss before he and Sophia start aggressively making out right in front of everybody. The camera cuts to Nina's face looking like she's about to pass out from secondhand embarrassment, or maybe jealousy. Like, listen, I'm just saying. That face wasn't just, oh no, PDA, it was, this guy is a problem, and I do not like it. And then there's a part where Nina straight up tells Sophia, he's not right for you. Like, okay girl, what's your real problem with this dude, huh? Like, oh, why is she so uncomfortable with Sophia being with Andrew? Is it really because she thinks he's not good enough for her? Or they haven't known each other for as long as they have? Or is it because deep down she would rather be with Sophia instead? Maybe. I'm just saying. Overall, the movie feels like it was trying to be a thoughtful exploration of friendship and women's connections across generations, but it just couldn't commit to the depth or complexity of the source material. It's a decent effort, but it definitely pulls its punches where it counts, especially when it comes to the queerness at heart of Lily and Snowflower's relationship. Also, let's not forget the fan itself as a symbol. In the book, it serves as a physical representation of the bond between the women. It's literally how they write their deepest feelings to each other, but the movie essentially reduces it to another prop. The fan is supposed to show their deepest feelings as they grow and live through the different stages of their lives, but in the film, they just kind of show that it exists without fully explaining why it's important.
你是拉拉吗？你是拉拉吗？你是拉拉吗？
Lisa Say is an author best known for her novels that explore the lives of Chinese women, both in China and the diaspora. Although she's only 1/8 Chinese, she often describes herself as Chinese in her heart, a connection that she says was deeply influenced by her paternal grandparents and her time spent in Los Angeles Chinatown as a child. Her writing is known for blending meticulous historical research with deeply personal, emotionally resonant storytelling. Her first major work, On Gold Mountain, is a memoir about her Chinese-American family and their struggles to build a life in America. She's also known for her Red Princess mystery series and the other historical novels like Peony in Love and Shanghai Girls. Here's how C describes what led her to write The Snowflower and the Secret Fan.
A review of a book on foot binding for the Los Angeles Times. And in this book was just a 3 or 4 page mention of Nushu, the woman's secret writing system. And I became completely obsessed. And finally there came a day when I said to my husband, you know, honey, there's only one thing I can do. I've got to go to China and see what I can see. I got to meet, at that time, the oldest living Nushu writer. To me, that day that I spent with her was one of the most remarkable of my entire life, because it was really like talking to someone, like living history. And I pulled out my laptop and I wrote the first chapter of Snowflower and the Secret Fan.
When discussing Snowflower and the Secret Fan, C has said that it's a deeply personal book for her, even though it's set in a vastly different time and place. In one interview, she talks about how she draws on her own fears and personal experiences to create emotional resonance in her work.
17th century Chinese women writers used to talk about cutting to the bone to write. I think there's a lot of truth in that, and that's the part that leaves me weak with fear. When I write something like Beautiful Moon's Death, Lily's letter of vituperation, and what it does to Snowflower and Snowflower's death, I'm experiencing and reliving my own losses and those that haven't happened, and I hope never do. That process leaves me weak and depleted, so that by the end of writing Snowflower, I felt like I'd survived a terrible illness.
I mean, yeah, can you imagine spending months or even just years inside your own head, reliving the worst emotional wounds you can imagine, just to get a story right? And I feel like you can feel the emotional depth in Snowflower and the Secret Fan. The aching, the longing, the devastating regret. It hits different when you know the author's really going through it. Interestingly, she also describes the Latongbon in the novel as something that had to be carefully wooed and cultivated, much like a romantic relationship today. She says,
I came to look at the Lao Tong relationship like an emotional marriage, when actual marriage had very little emotion attached to it.
Which, like, yeah, the way Lily talks about Snowflower sometimes, that is not just bestie talking, it's someone trying to earn another person's love. To be seen, to be valued. It's exactly the kind of intense, desperate emotional connection that could easily cross the line into romantic territory, even if the language of the time couldn't quite articulate it that way. That said, Lisa C. has been careful not to directly label the relationship between Lily and Snowflower as romantic or lesbian in interviews. Instead, she tends to talk about the intense, sometimes overwhelming emotional intimacy that women can share, and leaves it up to the reader to decide just how deep the intimacy runs. This approach gives her readers the freedom to interpret the bond through their own lenses, queer, platonic, or otherwise. So while she may not have written it explicitly as a queer love story, she definitely left the door open for those of us who want to read it that way. And honestly, that's enough for me. And honestly, that's what we're going to be doing here on this day. Thank you. So yeah. Lisa C. may not come right out and say that Lily and Snowflower were more than just friends, but she definitely gave us the subtext to work with. And honestly, in a world where queer stories have been hidden, erased, or rewritten for centuries, sometimes a little ambiguity is all we get.
你是拉拉吗？你是拉拉吗？你是拉拉吗？
Quick disclaimer. I'm not going to claim that all Laotong relationships were sapphic in nature. I'm more concerned about Lily and Snowflower's relationship specifically, as it applies to the story. Laotong. It's not just a fancy term for besties, it's a formalized, lifelong emotional bond between two women, considered more binding than marriage. Think of it as an ancient Chinese version of soulmates, but with contracts and matchmakers involved. In the In the Jiangyun region of Hunan, China, Laotong relationships were arranged between girls who matched on several criteria: birth dates, birth order, foot size, and other astrological factors. This wasn't a casual relationship. It was a deeply committed, exclusive connection that persisted even after marriage, a rare space for genuine emotional intimacy and a society that often treated women as little more than marriage pawns? As little more than marriage pawns. Unlike sworn sisterhoods, which dissolved upon marriage, a Laotong bond persisted, providing emotional support through the women's lives. According to Tongguan in their paper Friendship or Romantic Love, Laotong relationships resist simple Western categories like friendship or romantic love. They argue that these bonds were fluid by nature, existing in a space that didn't fit neatly into our modern Western ideas of platonic and romantic relationships. They note that Laotong were chosen connections, unlike arranged marriages, and often involved emotional exclusivity, affiliative need, and mutual dependence, characteristics we typically associate with romantic love, even if the relationships weren't always explicitly sexual. Tong also points out that the physical closeness and intense emotional intimacy that sometimes developed in Laotong bonds might have been shaped by the extreme isolation and gender segregation of the time. Women's lives were confined by foot binding and strict social norms, which meant their closest emotional relationships were often other women. However, they are careful to note that this intimacy might have been more about situational closeness rather than clear, conscious lesbian desire, cautioning against over-applying Western queer theory to a culturally specific context like 19th century China. But here's where I push back a little. I completely understand that Western queer theory doesn't perfectly map onto every historical context, and I really respect the need to avoid cultural erasure, but it also feels a bit dismissive to say that these bonds can't be considered queer just because they don't fit neatly into these frameworks. Like, if you have such a deeply emotional and exclusive lifeline bond that's often described as emotional marriage, I mean, I'm sorry, that sounds pretty gay to me. Additionally, it's the whole situational homosexuality thing, where a person's preferred sexual behavior may not be possible, so rather than refraining from sexual activity completely, they engage in substitute sexual behaviors. That, I mean, just sounds like a way to disguise or reword queer activities. Come on now, we know what's up. Let's not kid ourselves here.
Girls kiss other girls, and no one bats an eye. But when I kiss my homies goodnight, society calls me gay.
Alright, let's get into the part that everyone seems to want to tiptoe around. The certain scene in Snowflower and the Secret Fan. Like, I'm sorry, but you can get to write a scene where two girls lie together, unclothed, exploring each other's bodies, and then hit me with the, oh, they're just really good friends. Like, that's not how this works, my guy. So let's talk about the scene. It happens when Snowflower and Lily are around 15 years old, a time when they're on the cusp of being married off, but still deeply entwined in their exclusive, intense Laotong bond.
She searched my face, then let her eyes travel down my neck across my breasts to the flat of my stomach. I should have felt embarrassed by the way she stared, but she was my Laotong, my old same. There was nothing to be ashamed of. She licked her finger, and it was no less a fluid movement than the first time she'd done it. As soon as that wetness touched my skin, I couldn't help closing my eyes. The feeling made my body heavy and breathless. As she had done with me, I took my time to look at her body, the slenderness of her neck, the small mounds that formed her breasts, the flat expanse of her stomach that was as inviting as a new piece of silk, waiting for embroidery stitches, the twin hip bones that protruded sharply, below that a triangle identical to my own, then two slim legs tapering down until they disappeared into her red silk sleeping slippers. You have to remember that I was not yet married. I still did not know the ways of a man and wife. Only later did I learn that nothing is more intimate for a woman than her sleeping slippers, and nothing is more erotic for a man than seeing the white skin of a naked woman against the bright redness of those slippers. But on that night, I can tell you that my eyes lingered on them.
I'm sorry, but that is not just two BFFs experimenting or innocently exploring their friendship. That is physical, intimate, and charged. And the way Lily reflects on it later in life makes it clear that this moment sticks with her, shaping her understanding of what real connection and emotional intimacy feels like. And then there's the contrast between Lily's relationship with Snowflower and her relationship with her husband. Lily never expresses even a fraction of the emotional or physical longing for her husband that she does for Snowflower. Her marriage is transactional, a duty, an arrangement for social advancement and childbearing. She doesn't derive any pleasure from bed business, but does it like a chore for the sole sake of producing heirs and securing her position within her husband's family. Meanwhile, her connection to Snowflower is emotionally intense, passionate, and all-consuming. She obsesses over her approval, yearns for her love, and agonizes over their misunderstandings in a way she never really does about her husband. Of course, it's important to remember that these characters wouldn't have had the modern language to describe their bond as lesbian or queer. Which leads me to the next section. Historical queerness in 19th century China.
你是拉拉吗？你是拉拉吗？你是拉拉吗？
Let's zoom out for a moment. If we're going to talk about the queerness in Snowflower and the Secret Fan, we need to understand what queerness actually looked like in the 19th century China. And spoiler alert, it wasn't all foot binding and filial piety. In the Qing dynasty, male same-sex relationships were not uncommon and were often depicted in literature and theater. For instance, in the tale of Tu Ershun, or the Rabbit God, it tells of a man named Hu Tianbao who, after being executed for expressing love towards a male official, was deified as a protector of male lovers. His cult gained popularity in the Fujian province, though it faced suppression by Qing authorities. Stories from the time didn't shy away from a male desire, but they often framed it in ways that walked a delicate line between fascination and moral warning. Take Wan Julan, for example. It's a Qing dynasty tale from Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio by Pu Songling, where a beautiful young man, who turns out to be a shape-shifting fox spirit, seduces a male scholar. The story blends supernatural fantasy with homoerotic undertones, and while the relationship is portrayed as deeply alluring, it also ends in tragedy and death. These kinds of narratives acted as a double-edged sword. They explore the emotional and erotic potential of same-sex bonds, but often wrap them in supernatural danger or moral ambiguity. So even when affection between men was admired, the story still reinforced the pressure to return to Confucian values: marriage, family duty, and legacy. Basically, you can enjoy the fantasy, but don't get too comfortable. While male same-sex relationships were more frequently documented, female same-sex relationships have largely flown under the historical radar, in part because of women's limited roles in public life. That said, they absolutely existed. In Guangdong Province, the Golden Orchid Society provided an institutional framework for female-female partnerships. Women in the society swore lifelong oaths of sisterhood, lived together, and in some cases even held wedding ceremonies with one another. These unions weren't just romantic or emotional. They often served as practical alternatives to heterosexual marriage, granting women greater autonomy and mutual economic support. Golden Orchid women could refuse arranged marriages and choose to remain in female households, a radical choice in a society structured around patrilineal inheritance and filial duty. We also see traces of female same-sex desire in literature. Qing dynasty poet Wu Zhao left behind verses that express deep affection and possibly erotic longing for other women. Wu, who was praised in her time for cheap poetry, often wrote from the perspective of female characters or personas. In one poem, she laments the separation from a beloved woman with aching intensity, blurring the line between platonic devotion and romantic love. Her work is a rare but powerful testament to female queerness within the heavily gendered space of classical Chinese poetry.
On your slender body, your jade and coral girdle ornaments chime, like those of a celestial companion, come from the green jade city of heaven. One smile from you when we meet, and I become speechless and forget every word. For too long you have gathered flowers and leaned against the bamboos, your green sleeves growing cold. In your deserted valley, I can visualize you all alone, a girl harboring her cryptic thoughts. You glow like a perfumed lamp. In the gathering shadows, we play wine games and recite each other poems. Then you sing, remembering South of the River, with its heartbreaking verses. We both are talents who paint our eyebrows. Unconventional as I am, I want to possess the promised heart of a beautiful woman like you. It is spring. Vast mists cover the 5 lakes. My dear, let me buy you a red painted boat and carry you away.
Legally, the Qing dynasty criminalized certain homosexual acts under statutes concerning illicit sexual conduct, but enforcement was inconsistent. Socially, Confucian values promoted heterosexual marriage and reproduction, yet same-sex relationships, particularly between men, were often tolerated as long as they didn't interfere with familial responsibilities. A man could have a male lover and still be expected to marry and produce heirs. This form of compartmentalization allowed queer practices to persist beneath a surface of orthodoxy. So when we look at Snowflower and the Secret Fan, it's not just a story set in a vacuum. The intense emotional and physical intimacy between Lily and Snowflower echoes real historical practices and relationships in Qing Dynasty China. Their connection isn't an anomaly, it's a part of a broader, often hidden but undeniably present tapestry of queerness, one that includes female partnerships, erotic poetry, underground cults, and gender-defiant love stories.
你是拉拉吗？你是拉拉吗？你是拉拉吗？
Something that both the movie and most discussions of the book seem to share is this need to play it safe, to frame the story as one about sisterhood, loyalty, and trauma, and to completely leave out the word gay entirely. Particularly in the movie, Snowflower and Lily's relationship is completely watered down. Now, don't get me wrong, stories about deep platonic love between women are absolutely important. If you read Lily and Snowflower's bond as purely friendship, you still have a beautiful, heart-wrenching story about 2 women navigating a brutal world together. But when we ignore the potential queerness of the relationship, when we sidestep, sanitize, or just call it a close friendship again and again, we're not being neutral. We're cutting off a part of their connection. We're shrinking the emotional range they're allowed to have. And more than that, we're reinforcing this idea that queer love is somehow less valid, less historical, less valuable, and less real. We're pretending that people haven't always found ways to love each other, even when the world gave them no language, no space, and no approval. And when we look at Lily and Snowflower, whispering secrets in the moonlight, writing secret messages on fans, yearning for each other despite being apart, we have to ask, why are we so scared of admitting that they shared a love beyond the bounds of friendship? So what is the story of Lily and Snowflower really? It's a testament to how deep, complicated, and powerful queer love can be, even when people living in it don't have the words, the labels, or the freedom to name it. Although people try to shrink down their bond, make it safe, silent, and platonic, you can't deny the messy, tender, painful, and yes, deeply romantic nature of their relationship. And once you start looking at stories like this through a queer lens, you'll realize they're everywhere. Hidden histories, quiet rebellions, women whispering secrets to each other in forgotten languages. Queerness didn't appear in modern times, it's always been here. You just have to know how to look. Because history isn't silent, you just have to listen closely. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. Seriously, you're now officially part of the Secret Fan Club. Yippee! Drop a flower emoji in the comments to confuse everyone who didn't get this far. They'll never know. How would they know? I really encourage you to do your own digging into queer life in 19th century China. It's fascinating, complex, and honestly way queerer than most textbooks would have you believe. And definitely give Snowflower and the Secret Fan a read. Yeah, it's tragic. Yeah, it's one of those doom dreary vibes, but there's something painfully beautiful in it. The kind of emotional truth that hits home even now. As for the movie, well, if you've read the book and want to scream, "They were more than just friends" at your screen for an hour and a half, be my guest. Otherwise, you're not missing much. I've done my best with the research here, but I'm totally open to learning more. If you've got additional context, thoughts, corrections, or spicy takes, drop them in the comments. Just remember to keep the discussion respectful, even if we disagree. We're all just trying to make sense of these stories and each other. Got any other books or stories you want me to dive into? Let me know. I'm always on the lookout for more queer history, misunderstood characters, or tragic sapphics staring longingly in candlelight. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and remember to drink water.
Yeah, I like girls.
Generation.
Yeah, girls' generation. And